I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Oh, I see some folks were able to access the attendance sheet, which is awesome. All right, well, I think we should just go ahead and get started. So thumbs up if you can see this okay and hear me okay. See Justine, okay, awesome. And our folks here with us today, I don't see anybody's faces, but can you indicate that you are hearing me? Okay, I see Miss Janetta Williams. Awesome, awesome. Okay, great. Well, welcome to today's session. My name is Olivia Percoco. I'm the Community Food Coordinator with the Resourceful Communities program, and we'll say a little bit more about our program and what we do in just a second. But I work with a bunch of nonprofits throughout rural North Carolina on increasing food access. And I'm joined with my colleague, Justine. Justine, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Justine Post. I'm the Faith and Food Coordinator for Resourceful Communities. So I've been working with churches and supporting them in their food ministries for over 5 years. And so this topic is particularly important to me as someone who's supported churches in applying to our small grants cycle, but also helping them think through and access different funding opportunities. So really excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, it's pretty great. We do have a whole faith and food initiative that is dedicated to supporting rural churches because we understand that they are incredible anchors in their communities and provide a lot of broad community support services. So we're hoping that this training will help you access some funding to expand your ministries. And the focus is on food ministries today, but all of this information can be expanded to really any kind of project or ministry that you're running. So without further ado, we will jump right in. But here's the agenda for today. We'll be explaining a little bit about ourselves because we would love to see some more General Baptist participation in our network. Like I just mentioned, we love working with churches, and we'll have some opportunities for you to join our network at the end, including joining our e-newsletter, liking and following us on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, we have some upcoming trainings, but we want you to understand who we are and what we do and where you might fit in. And then we'll talk a little bit about why grant writing, because it is it's work, right? And a lot of churches, it's a new kind of field for them. And then we'll jump into the actual nuts and bolts. You'll notice that a lot of the presentation today is going to focus on basically the homework, like the pre-work before you even put pen to paper around the grant application itself. That's because in our experience, we've noticed that for groups who are spending the time doing the research, finding the funding that actually fits their ministries, they have a higher success rate when they actually submit their applications instead of just throwing spaghetti at the wall. So after that, we'll jump into the actual grant writing checklist, and you will be getting all of these materials after the fact. So we do have a grant writing checklist, which is much more involved than the PowerPoint, but you will also be getting a copy of the PowerPoint slides, as well as some additional resources inclusive of funding for churches overview. So you'll have a whole list of grants that you can look into to see if you are eligible for and if it's worth applying. So anyway, Resourceful Communities is an initiative of the Cultivation Fund, which is a national environmental nonprofit, and that works on some traditional conservation work, buying and preserving land. But the Resourceful Communities program works almost exclusively in rural North Carolina. We do some land ownership work in some of the more southern states, but almost exclusively rural North Carolina and the most economically distressed communities, supporting a network of rural grassroots organizations, inclusive of churches, faith-based organizations, small nonprofits that are working on what our mission is, which is triple bottom line. So these groups are engaged in some way, shape, or form in economic development, environmental stewardship, and social justice and community engagement. So all of the projects in some way touch those three pillars. And you would think that as coming from a conservation organization, the environment would be, the one that maybe we care the most about. But in fact, we cast a really broad net with that triple bottom line, and we do entirely understand that people come into our network from different places. And a lot of that has come from the place of trying to improve community health, just provide access to basic needs. And the way that that fits in is touching a lot on agriculture and food access, and particularly local food access. So that's why, if you know anything about our initiatives, food is in almost every title, or health is in almost every title, because that's how we view the triple bottom line. And the way that we support these groups is in three primary strategies. So one you're experiencing today, it is the skills building trainings that we host. So on grant writing, board development, succession planning, financial management, budgeting. There's a whole bunch of trainings that we offer to help really build the internal organizational capacity so that y'all can be the strongest you can be and move your work forward independent of us or anybody else. The second strategy is facilitated networking, which I think is the most fun and also the strongest strategy. And that is our ability to bring folks together to learn from each other. So peer-to-peer learning, having rural groups visit other rural groups engaged in similar work to hear boots on the ground strategies for success and lessons learned instead of hearing it from us, as well as connection to resources and funders and agencies that some groups may otherwise not have connection to. And then lastly, we have a small grants program. So it's called the Creating New Economies Fund, or CNEF is what we refer to it as. And it's up to $15,000, but average of $8,000 to $10,000 directly to these small rural nonprofit organizations engaging in triple bottom line work. So this combination of direct funding, capacity building support, project planning, and network engagement really creates some robust, sustainable programs and strong organizations in these rural spaces. So that's Resourceful Communities. And I really, really would love, again, to see some of your names again on future events and really build you into our network if it makes sense for you to be part of it. So again, we will have some opportunities for engaging with us in the future later on, but I'm gonna pass it over to Justine, who's gonna get us started with the actual nuts and bolts of today's training. However, I do want to note that please use the chat as well as a parking lot for any questions that you might have. That's probably the easiest way for us to know, especially when we're sharing our screen and you're so little, it's hard to see like if your hands are raised. So just use the chat and make this session your own. So, all right, Justine, go ahead, take it away.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Although it's creeping into afternoon, I would love for folks to kind of share in the chat as I get going, what brings you here, what made you sign up for this particular workshop. Maybe if you want to share just briefly, if you have a food ministry, if you're hoping to start one, just share that in the chat. We'd love to see kind of why you're here, especially I think, as Olivia was saying, one of the main goals that we have and that we do is to connect with folks in churches one-on-one, not necessarily just kind of providing an overall training and opportunities like this. So would love to hear kind of what brings you here, so we can figure out how to best support you and how to use the tools that we have to make sure that you get access to funding and resources and everything. So the question is, why does my church need to write grants? I know that in my years working and supporting churches, there's not always, they've never written a grant before. I'd say 80% of the churches that I've worked with had never written a grant before applying to receive funding from us. And so want to kind of encourage you all that it's something that might be a skill that you need to stretch or move on. And that's kind of why we're here. But it could significantly improve your outreach and your ability to serve those who are in need. So this can help your ministries to reach more community members, helping you to continue to respond to community needs. I I think it allows your congregation to be more involved in a different way, right? So a lot of times tithes and offerings are included in the form of actual money, food donations, those sorts of things, but grant writing and applying for funding would allow you to kind of double that money and build off of that, and to really increase the value of your church's contributions as well. And yeah, so sometimes it's hard to make the case for a new project or outreach program until the concept has been proven. Grants can fund pilots if you want to try out a new idea, if you want to start something new that the church might eventually take on. So that's an option as well. So where to start? This is kind of a big overarching piece. And luckily, at the end of this session, Olivia has compiled a whole cheat sheet of funding options that churches are eligible to apply for. So we'll have kind of a lot of resources for you all after the fact. But we really kind of want to think broadly, like what Olivia was saying about who has the money, because you might not know where it is. So employers and companies, that's, you know, countywide, and also statewide. Banks, Truist has a foundation now that used to be BB&T. I think Wells Fargo has a giving arm, you know, lots of opportunities there. Foundations, so, you know, North Carolina is robust with a lot of foundations that you probably have heard of here and there. Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation, a lot of different Reynolds, Z. Smith Reynolds, Kate B. Reynolds, the Duke Endowment, you know, these are North Carolina Community Foundation. Churches and denominations. Some denominations have access to funding through, maybe it was a family set up endowment or things like that. And they're not often that advertised. I was working with the Methodist denomination, one of their conferences in Western North Carolina. And it wasn't even the conference, it was just a district. So just a region had access to a grant funding that was not well advertised. And it took me like 2 years to find it and connect other churches to that. So you really don't even know what's out there. And individuals, you know, there's oftentimes through personal connections, through church connections, that that is a good relationship to cultivate. And there's kind of some tips that that exist out there to help folks cultivate relationships with individuals. I'd say we primarily work to help folks gain access to grant funds through foundations and other arms, employers, kind of helping them kind of bridge those gaps as well. So these are a couple of examples, and I want to direct your attention to even more specific options. So honestly, yeah, Google, what my former colleague used to call Google University. Start there and just Google the top 25 employers in your county or in your surrounding counties. Then Google employer plus corporate or community giving. You might not know what you might find depending on it. We know of a lot of organizations, especially folks that are doing food access work, that have reached out to their local Lowe's hardware stores, and they will sometimes give out $500 gift cards to go to, you know, project like helping with whether it's a shed if they have a garden, or you know, cold storage for their food distribution. So it's really about kind of starting small and starting local and just researching what's around your region and your county, and then kind of scaling out. So banks especially as well, inviting you to kind of see what resources are out there as well. We also have what's called a corporate giving guide. So this was put together by one of our AmeriCorps interns a couple years ago. And so this is kind of a cheat sheet to help you look through, look for grants. And we're going to talk about eligibility later because that will come up for churches. But you can search by funding type, funding topic, and geographic location. So if you're in the Piedmont, if you're in the Sandhills or mountains, you can look. And you can look by whether that's volunteers, money, or in kind. And here are the topics. So this is how the data is divided out, and it's pretty easy to look for. I usually search, since I'm working with churches and food ministries, I often click for food. So food pantries, cooking classes, markets, farmer support, community gardens. And you see here that this is a whole list and it goes all the way down. And granted, it's a lot, but you can find, see there's Food Lion, Golden Leaf. So it goes from really smaller giving arms to larger, like Golden Leaf Foundation. But Harris Teeter, you know, there's a lot of grocery stores that have giving arms of their options. And so this is a really good start. If Googling feels really overwhelming, this is a really good place to start and browse and really see if you have, if you meet the qualifications and the eligibility of some of these funding options. This is the North Carolina Community Foundation's website. Again, we'll share this later on, but they have a handful of options. So you just search, you just click grants, and they have community grant ranking, giving circles. They have a lot of different options. So there's really a lot out there. It's just trying to find, and that's kind of, you know, there's a lot of research to be done. But you can also, you know, Google top foundations in North Carolina. There's just a lot of, you know, you could just really start with research and really just learning about who's giving out money and how much of it. So for example, these numbers are pretty large. So it, you know, it's not that the money's not out there. It's definitely out there. It's just about finding the right fit for your funder and for what you need. And kind of about cultivating that relationship with the funder if possible, and about your grant writing skills and about kind of telling your story of your food ministry or of your outreach ministry. So you could even start by looking at some of these. It's a pretty significant amount of money that is available just in North Carolina alone. So like I said, funder priorities. Research is really important. It's really important to find out kind of what your niche is and what you're offering to your community and what that's described under. It's really important to look at who they give to. So small profits versus established grantees like United Way. United Way has a whole, like, there was, for example, Food Lion Feeds grant that was available back in September that I sent out to some of my food pantries I work with. And I didn't even read the small print, even though I should have, that they had to have been a partner with United Way already if they wanted to be eligible to apply, which was a limitation for some, but not for all, because some already partner with United Way. So that was already a part of that. So geographic focus, there's plenty of limitations for foundations and other giving arms of companies in regions. And exclusions, we're going to talk about that as well. Sometimes churches are excluded from larger and smaller grant giving opportunities. So it's really important to kind of read through the fine print and see whether or not you as a church would be excluded. But there's a lot of wiggle room in that. And again, it's kind of all about the research and how you read their website. So how do you know what funders will fund and how much they give out and all of those things? So there's a lot of ways you can do this. I think the first thing that I would suggest is just going to their website. And so, for example, a lot of, like, the Luis Oriel Burovich Endowment, usually foundations that are giving out quite a bit of money will report all of those who receive funding. So this gives you a sense of kind of who got what and how much. There's not much here, as you can see, detail wise on what it was specifically for, but it gives you a sense of what kinds of organizations they're supporting and to do and for what they're trying to work toward. And so you can see those are pretty large amounts of grants, and it's kind of a variety of it is for a variety of needs and opportunities there. Excuse me. And I think the last place that you can find out where funders are giving to and how much is their 990. And that's a tax document that basically, because foundations are still responsible to the public. So it's a public document, and it's for the public to see how much money they have and how much they're giving away. We're going to include as a resource an example 990. So these are pretty easy to find. Just again, Google University will help you kind of get there. But Olivia did a great job. She just kind of highlighted here what would be important to look up and to know about. So contact information, we're going to talk about funder outreach and funder cultivation. So that's important. So this is the Stonecutter Foundation, and they're based in Spindale. So here's their information. And again, this can all be really overwhelming. So there's not any like need to like go here. If they have it on their website, I would really recommend reaching out and looking at their website. But line number 25, contributions, gifts, and grants paid. So they gave out a total of 500, like over $500,000 in is this for calendar year 2020? So that was for last year. And so that's the really important stuff that you need to know. So we highlighted this, and that's just if you're really pursuing kind of larger grant funding and really want to kind of have a better understanding of the foundation and how much money they give out. Really good way to look at that kind of information. So we have how to read the 990, which I kind of just went over. So you want to have the contact information and amount of contributions and gifts paid. Oh, good. Yeah. So that was a nice reminder for me. Part 8 and part 15, information on how to submit an application, deadlines, restrictions, etc. So that's all there. And I just want to have this as a resource for you if you really start getting into researching funding. I think there's a lot of merit in doing this research, and there's a lot of merit in just kind of getting a sense of their numbers based on their annual reports, which are usually published on their website. So I'm going to send it back to Olivia, and she's going to talk about Funder Fit.
Awesome. Yes, and like Justine said, you will be getting a copy of all of this. The 990 is such a stinking long tax document, but there's really only like 4 sections you really need to know about. And a lot of the funding that I did pull to share with churches, a lot of the information came from there, because what I noticed was a lot of the groups that would fund churches specifically, like they did not have an explicit eligibility requirement that made it so churches cannot apply. A lot of them were smaller family foundations that didn't have websites. So that 990 is helpful where, like, if all else fails, you can find the 990. And I had recommended creating a GuideStar profile. If you just Google GuideStar, create an account, it's totally free. And that's basically just a clearinghouse of everybody's, like, you can just search for a foundation that you find and you can pull their 990 from there. So you can go as deep in the rabbit hole as you want to. But the second thing that we need to think about once we've found money is whether it's a fit, and that's on 2 different levels. That's on the basic eligibility requirement level and the programmatic fit level. And so meaning, like, every funder has different priorities and changes that they want to make in the world, places where they want their money to go to. And you need to decide whether or not what you're applying for, your ministry, your project, what have you, is a fit for that priority. So if you're doing healthy food pantry and they only want to fund workforce development or economic development, then not the best fit. But anyway, like Justine mentioned about the types of funding, there's different types of organizations that do fund, including foundations. Foundations, a note on those, they tend to be a little bit more flexible. There's often a board of trustees and a number of program officers, or if it's a family foundation, the family that you can talk to and ask questions to. They often also go through some strategic planning. They have the flexibility to do that. So sometimes the priorities change. Justine just showed you the North Carolina Community Foundation. And it's interesting because they do have their affiliates. So not every county, but most counties have an affiliate. And but they also have the ability to fundraise for new initiatives. So for example, with COVID, they fundraised for what they called the Healing Communities Fund, which was a brand new priority, a brand new strategy for them to do some COVID-19 relief work. So I just say this to say, cultivate, and we'll talk about that, but also keep checking their website and see if their strategies and priorities are changing over time. Endowments are a little bit more strict. They're usually set up so the money is going to the same thing in perpetuity by the founder, who's usually deceased, so can't really change it. And actually, the Louise Oriole Burovich Endowment is a good example of that too, as well as the Duke Endowment. It's the same stuff every single year with some wiggle room here and there, but for the most part, it's the same priorities. And then also be looking at if it's federal or state. You might find a grant that is like, it looks like it's the perfect fit for what you want to do, but just be mindful if it's public money, as I'm sure many of you are aware of, it's a little bit more difficult to apply for and to manage. And so just analyzing your own capacity to deal with that kind of money is also part of this eligibility kind of question for yourself. So think about your own, ability to, because not all money is created equal in the funding world. So just be mindful of the source. Then we want to determine if you're even eligible. So there's typical exclusions that you should be looking out for. Justine mentioned this a little bit, but you should definitely know that a common exclusion in the funding world are religious organizations. Now, let me show you an example of what this might look like, however, because it's not always a blanket you can apply. So Bank of America is a good example. And you might have a local Bank of America. Banks typically, just like top employers, like to give locally. So if you have a branch, it would be worth looking into, but they list their eligibility criteria right on their website. It says you must be a tax exempt organization. You'll see that everywhere. So you must have a 501c3. If you're a General Baptist church, you have a group ruling. And so that should not be a problem for you. We just funded actually a few Baptist churches when we did a COVID-19 emergency cycle, and we were able to get that group ruling letter. So if you don't have it on file, contact somebody from the General Baptists for that group ruling letter. So you should be set. But the thing I wanted to show you was this. So we do not provide general funding to any organization whose purpose is to promote or to discourage the observance or proselytization of religious beliefs. However, we will support such organizations' funding of homeless shelters, soup kitchens, or other social service needs. The organization may be asked to provide proof of the community project receiving funding. And that's pretty common. So instead of just blanket saying that churches need not apply, they often will include this thing around, we'll fund churches, but it needs to have broad community benefit, which I'm sure your outreach ministries do. And so you could absolutely go ahead and apply, so long as the rest of you meet the other eligibility requirements, including like they actually fund in your region. Another example I'll quickly go through is Wells Fargo. So if we go to their corporate giving guide, they have a community giving page as well, where you can see they've got national priorities, but they also have local community grants. And you can peruse this on your own time, but as you go through the website, you can actually find a contact information for North Carolina. But I wanted to show you the grant process, because if we go to the grant process, they similarly, here's their grant eligibility, have to be a 501c3, have to be in a county that they serve, which is very common. So like if you are looking on that corporate giving guide, a lot of them will say, you need to be located in the communities we serve, and they'll often link a map or like within 20 miles of a facility, like if it's Tyson or something like that. So you can look up your eligibility that way, but it says under what they will not consider grants for, again, we see religious organizations, unless they are engaged in programs that are non-sectarian benefit a broad base of the community, and have a separate 501c3 designation, which again, a lot of the churches that we work with can easily fit into that because all of their ministries do have that broad community benefit, and it's not hard for them to make that case. So I just want you to be aware of that, because that will be something that you see very often, and I don't want it to spook you. So the other thing to think about, we've talked about regional specifications. You can have the best written grant in the entire world, but if you're in Eastern North Carolina and you are applying to the Gateway Foundation, which only funds Western North Carolina, you might as well have just wasted, 6 hours of your life, because you're not going to get funded. So just be looking for that, which again, always listed on the website. Or again, if you go through that 990, and if we have time to pull it up at the end, I think we should scroll all the way to the bottom. You can see where all the money went. So you can see the list of the organizations and the amounts that they got. And that's helpful for you to know, are they funding churches? How much are they funding churches? Like what's a reasonable amount to ask for, and what types of things are they funding? The other thing to think about is capital projects. If you're trying to expand a facility, fix an HVAC system, pour cement and build like an outdoor something for your food pantry, some funders explicitly will not fund those capital expenses. They like to fund program stuff. And so if that's the thing that you're trying to fundraise for, and the funder explicitly says on the website, nope, won't fund that, then it's time to move on. So just be mindful of those things. Also be mindful that the grant process can be a little bit different. So some organizations will require a letter of intent or have an RFP process before the full application. And so this is usually a smaller, like more truncated version of the application. Typically don't need to include a super detailed budget, but they just want basically a project overview. And from there, the folks making decisions figure out whether or not your project seems to be something that they would fund, it seems to be competitive, and if so, then you would apply. We bring this up because you want to make sure that you're just being mindful of the dates, like when things are due, because if you miss that letter of intent period or the RFP period, then you're automatically cut out of the full application cycle. So just read that website really thoroughly, and we'll talk a little bit more about funder cultivation and how to make sure that you are on good terms, they know your name, all that good stuff in just a minute. But I have one activity I want to do with you, moving on to the programmatic eligibility or the programmatic fit side of things. So we're going to try something, and I'm hoping I hope it goes smooth, but what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you could please, if you have a smartphone or whatever, just pull out your phone and open up a web browser and go to slido.com. I'm going to put it slido.com, SLIDO.com. And you could also, if it's easier for you to, just because you're on your computer, use your web browser and open up a new tab, you can do that as well. But go to slido.com, and what it will look like is this. And it'll say, joining as a participant, enter code here. Just hang on. We're going to get to this activity. I just want us to get set up and make sure that we're on Slido. And I will be giving you the number in just a moment. If y'all could do a thumbs up or put in the chat that y'all are able to access Slido. We just want to use it as an engagement tool, because I'm going to be doing a little bit of polling. If you could indicate that that's working for you, either unmute yourself or put it in the chat or do a thumbs up. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. I'm sure it just seems cool. Awesome. Well, at least if one or two of us can even get on it, that's all that really matters, because it's awesome, because when we vote, we'll be able to see it in real time. If you would rather just use the chat for your answers, totally fine. That's totally fine with me. So here's the activity. We are on a committee together. And we are going to be looking at fundraising for a healthy food pantry. Let's suppose we're part of XYZ Baptist Church and we have a food pantry already, but especially with COVID, we've noticed, people really need more access to the healthy, fresh food, stuff that to date we haven't really been able to get a hold of. And so we really want to do a better job of this. And so we're going to do a healthy food pantry project. The goal of this committee as a group is we need to decide, based on the activities that we're proposing we're going to do for this project and the funders that one of our committee members have found, which ones are a fit. So we all have a vote. We can all say it's worth applying to this funder or it's not. And then after we decide which one or multiple are a fit, we then need to decide which activities are we going to talk about. And so we wanted to make this known that there's often word counts in grant applications and proposals, and it's not disingenuous to uplift and highlight the pieces of your project that speak the most clearly to the funder priority. You might have a whole slew of activities and multiple goals for the project, and maybe 2 out of 3 are a really good fit for the funder. Those 2 out of 3 are the ones that you should be spending the bulk of your application talking about, because you're trying to make the case that, hey, funder, we are after the same things right now. We are trying to make the same impact on the community, and here's how. So you're really just trying to speak the funder's language. So here we go. All right, committee, here's our healthy food pantry. We're in a committee meeting. Here's the activities that we've already decided on. So we decided that we're going to be providing income for 2 local farmers because we're going to be buying from some farmers we know right down the road. We're also going to be creating a new fresh food access point in a food desert. We know that because we know a lot of the food pantries in our area, none of them actually are providing fresh food access the way that we're trying to do so. We're going to be reducing food miles, which is good for the environment because instead of the food coming from Oregon or California or Mexico, it's going to be coming from a hop, skip, and a jump down the road. We're going to be providing recipe cards and nutrition information for fresh food items to help folks actually use the fresh food that we're providing, since this is new for us. And we're also going to be providing additional produce boxes to clients who are screened for type 2 diabetes. So again, that focus on health, trying to meet the need of those who might have some additional health struggles through this additional intervention. So those are the activities. We've created a really robust healthy food pantry program. Now, a committee member went out and did some of the research that we just talked about, went through all of the eligibility stuff and figured out, hey, here's 3 funders that maybe we should be looking at. We've got Bank of America, whose priority is economic mobility and meeting basic needs. So basically helping folks, whether it's financial literacy or economic development, but then also meeting basic needs. Partners in Health and Wholeness, whose priority is health ministries, inclusive of food, active living, mental health. And then the Duke Energy Foundation, whose priority is environmental stewardship. So our goal now is to vote which fund. So if you are on this committee and you know that it's going to take a lot of time to write this grant proposal, which funders do you think are a fit, are worth applying to? So you should already be on slido.com. If you go and put in this code now, 581028, again, I'll put that in the chat, 581028, you should be able to go ahead and vote. And again, if that's too much and you'd rather just use the chat, that is absolutely fine. Just let me know what you think. And if you have questions, please let me know. I'll give you like 10 seconds to figure out which funders: Bank of America, which is meeting basic needs; Partners in Health and Wholeness, which is Food Ministries, and Duke Energy, which is environmental stewardship. Give us 10 more seconds. Come on, committee. And again, if the poll is too much, feel free to just, oh, there we go. We got something. You can just put it in the chat as well, what you think. So we got a vote for Bank of America and Partners in Health and Wholeness. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. And I would concur. I would agree. Bank of America and Partners in Health and Wholeness are probably the two strongest. Duke Energy is just environmental stewardship. The only thing that might be a fit for that priority is maybe reducing food miles, but even that's not enough to build an entire application around. So we're gonna scratch Duke Energy, and let's focus on, for the interest of time, let's focus on Partners in Health and Wholeness. The next question is, for Partners in Health and Wholeness, which activities are the strongest fit to uplift in a grant application? So if you're a funder who cares about health ministries, which of these activities are the ones that should be highlighted, that you should spend the most time in the application talking about? I give us like 15 seconds for this activity. And if you have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself. Excellent. Okay. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, okay. Awesome. So we have folks who voted for, let's see, provide income for 2 local farmers, create new fresh food access, provide recipe cards, and additional produce. So basically everything but reducing food miles. And I would agree. I think the one that I would not focus as much on is maybe the local farmers piece, the income piece, because Partners in Health and Wholeness is just focused on health, and they might care. I mean, I don't think that they wouldn't care about you supporting the incomes of a neighbor farmer, but because it's health, I think it would be the strongest to focus on B, D, and E, which we basically got. So I hope that activity helped you a little bit in understanding, like, there's some strategy to this, there's some kind of figuring out priorities to this, and it's not just like any funder that gives in your area you should apply to, because you'll be wasting a lot of your time. So a quick note on funder cultivation, because I'm the type of person who likes to just pick up the phone, have a conversation with somebody, and hear straight from the horse's mouth what they're looking to fund. And I think this will be a good strategy for you too. Cultivation is really just relationship building. It's getting to know the program officer, who's the person who helps kind of build relationships and then relays that information to the board of trustees, who ends up making the decision. Or if it's a family foundation, it could be the family member that's on that board directly. But it's an opportunity for you to say a little bit more about your program, invite them out to visit. Having a site visit and having a funder come and see your operations, get to know your community, see what you're dealing with, is really, really powerful, and says way more than just words on a piece of paper ever could. So this cultivation piece is important, so the funder knows who you are. It's good, just name recognition, basically. They have a bigger, broader gist of what you're looking to get funded. Even if the answer is no, because it's not a guarantee. Just because a funder knows you doesn't mean you're like in the club. But having a solid relationship with the program officer means that, hey, they might advocate for you pretty strongly when it comes to getting funded. Or if you do end up getting rejected, that application doesn't get funded, it could turn it into a not yet, basically. They might invite you to come back another time or provide feedback on your application. And it even saves you time with us time too, as funders. So in our own SNF cycle, we've started requiring folks give us a call, connect with one of the team members to talk through their project to see if it would be a fit or not, and just give some suggestions for strengthening the proposal. Because as part of the due diligence, like any application that gets submitted needs to be read. And so if we're getting a whole slew of applications that are just not a fit, then that's a lot of time on us going through stuff that we don't necessarily need to have gone through. And it's a lot of work on you all writing an application to us that's not going to get funded. So we always recommend starting with an email and inviting a phone call, just because then the program officer or whoever is more prepared for the phone call. However, if you cannot find an email address, and again, a lot of the funding that I've found for churches were smaller foundations that did not have websites, then it's probably best for you to just pick up the phone and do a cold call and then request another meeting time. Because you don't want to like call them in the middle of a meeting or in a time that they're not prepared to talk about a grant application because they don't know who the heck you are. So if you could start with an email, briefly introduce yourself. In the additional materials that we're going to be sending everybody, there will be a section that has a mock email. So it gives you an example of like, how long should this be? It should not be like a manifesto of who you are and what you want to do. It should just be a couple of lines that say, this is who we are, this is why we think we're a fit, and this is why we want to talk to you. Do you have a few times available in the next 2 weeks? That kind of thing. But then you just have to have a conversation about fit. And here's some recommendations basically to get you started. And some of these are pretty, self-explanatory, like don't ask questions that you could easily get answered on the website. We're trying to save time here and be efficient. You certainly can ask questions. However, if you have questions about recommendations, like if you're explaining your program and you ask them for recommendations about, hey, based on what you heard about our program, do we sound like we'd be a strong fit, or what resonated with you about our organization? Again, invite them out to visit. On the don't side, please don't try and convince them that you're a fit if they tell you straight up that you're not. That will just leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And instead of the name recognition working in your favor, it very easily could work against, because again, this is about building relationships and rapport. And also, don't put a program officer or whoever you're talking to in an awkward situation and try and get them to give you a definitive yes or no. One of the most frustrating things about grant writing is there's just a lot of vagueness and a lot of just like waiting and checking the calendar and the clock to be like, am I going to get funded or not? And it can be really tempting to just be, especially if you have a strong relationship with the program officer, to just be like, hey, Mr. John, like, can you please just, is my application going to get funded or not? They often cannot give you that information. And sometimes the person that you're talking to isn't even the end decision maker. So they really don't know. They're not just trying to keep information from you. So that's just some do's and don'ts to just be mindful of when entering into that phone conversation. But hopefully with that kind of etiquette, if you will, in mind, you'll be able to build a good relationship with the funder and get some of your burning questions answered. So it is 12:35 and we are finally jumping into the actual nuts and bolts of writing the proposal. I told you a lot of it was about the research, but I'm going to now pass it on back to Justine, who's going to be walking through, like showing you what a proposal could look like and walking you through the steps.
Thanks. Okay, and I want to be conscious of y'all's time. But basically, so I would love to know too, in the chat, if anyone out there is like looking for funding actively for their current food ministry or outreach ministry? I hope so, because I think that's kind of what we were hoping to promote and provide. So the long and short of it is I want to introduce you to like the best first grant opportunity for churches that exists in North Carolina. And it's open right now. So would love to know in the chat if anyone's heard of Partners in Health and Wholeness or if anyone's involved. But they are a program of the North Carolina Council of Churches, and they support churches who are committed to promoting health and wellness and wholeness in any sort of definition or context in their congregations and outside of their congregations. This website is like the best first step and intro. If you take nothing else from this workshop and this webinar and you're looking for funding, this is a really great resource. Thanks, Donnie, for sharing. So there's the link. And they basically, so they have a mini grant program. Mini grants range from $1,000 to $5,000, and they're available kind of, it's kind of a strange process, but they've got it all very clearly laid out on their website. So you basically have to agree to be part of their collaborative, which is a really simple, small kind of form you fill out. And those are open, as you see, until November 30th, so another month. And once you are a part of their collaborative, then you can apply for a mini grant. The more churches that you're partnering with for whatever health ministry, so that might be healthy food access, that might be a walking program or ministry, that might be an exercise program, cooking classes, it varies. But if you're partnered with a couple other churches, you can get up to $5,000 for your program. And so you really just have to follow these steps here. And once you're part of the collaborative, then you can apply to for a mini grant. And it's really easy. And look at this, there is a sample application. So since some of y'all are here for funding and wondering where to even start, like I said, this is really spoon-fed. So my suggestions to you when we're thinking about grant writing is when you come up to the actual application and you're getting ready to start writing, please, when they say, please read all instructions and requirements, please do that, please read. They are important. You want to make sure that what you're going to offer meets what their priorities are. So like we have a small grants application that will be coming up. We'll announce it at the end of the year. And then in January and February, we'll be taking applications. And we have a lot of writing at the beginning of our application. And I know for a fact, a lot of people skip over it because when they come to answer questions, if they would have read the stuff at the beginning, they would have answered it differently, or they would have known that they would not have qualified. And so it's pretty clear. So take the time and read it. Like, for example, you're not able to come back to and save your work and then come back. That's probably important to know because you can't just click out of the box. And then there's guidelines about filling out this form. So you always want to read over everything. So the actual grant application, a lot of the first ones that you might be working on will look a lot like this. So general information, physical address, the lead applicant. So sometimes that's pastors, but a lot of times that's lay members or lay leaders, those who are really kind of advancing the work, and contact information, details. So this is a good way to kind of see, do we fit in any of these categories? Smoking cessation, physical activity, healthy eating, mental health awareness, healthy aging, or other. If it's under the category of health and wholeness and wellness, they probably fund it. And I know for a fact, I know the folks here. So if anyone really wants to connect with an employee and with someone who manages the collaborative, let me know. So I can email you an introduction to Jessica, to Elizabeth, to Nicole. I know a handful of staff there that would love to talk with you and answer even more specific questions about what they do. So they have 5 questions and they say, please be as descriptive as possible. And you'll just, you'll see kind of as I outline, you'll see some of these questions kind of come up when we go through some of the content here. But it's usually around what the need actually is, how you're trying to address it. So the project or program, the work plan and timeline. So like, what are you actually going to do and when? And funding and budget. And so is how much. So if you notice, the who, what, where, when, and why kind of questions are coming up. So it's a really good way to think about it when you're thinking about grant writing, is how to answer those questions of what you want funding for. And their budget is amazing because look, they don't even have a whole form. We have a fancy form where you have to insert everything. You can just list your programming costs and put your total at the bottom. And there's usually a question around evaluation and results. So that's the application. That's the first thing. If you all are looking for money right now for your health ministry, food ministry in your church, I would strongly recommend starting here. If you learn nothing else, I think that would be a really good piece. And so I really do want to spend some time to talk about when you go to write your application, how to do it, because it can feel overwhelming if you've never done it before. So demonstrate your experience. Do some research in the background, but with this one, you know, there's not too much research to do, although I invite you to look at their website and look at what churches are part of the collaborative. Like I said, you know, we've already kind of mentioned a lot of these do's and don'ts. Do speak to the funders' priorities, do recycle text from previous applications. It's okay to copy and paste it just as long as it you edit, and ask for what you need. If there's like a limit, if you all, you know, are writing grants that are up to like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and you just think, well, I mean, I'll take all $20,000 if that's what they're giving me, and you kind of ad hoc what you're asking for, it's really easy as someone who's read a lot of grants in the last 5 years, grant applications, to know when folks are just kind of asking for money just because it's there. I think it's really important not to diminish what you're doing, but really just to be realistic. And do answer the question. I know that one's really basic, but when you finish with writing an answer to a question, you might have started just talking on and on about whatever it is that y'all are doing in your community. Go back and make sure, does this answer the question that they asked, and really kind of evaluate. So yeah, don't be too wordy. It's tempting to start an application last minute, but it's not advised. Don't sell yourself if it's not a fit. So if you're a food ministry looking for funding for just most of your canned goods, or funding to purchase food directly from a food bank or something like that, Partners in Health and Wholeness might not be the best fit for your health ministry, because they are really specific about kind of the health outcomes that they want to see with your food ministries. And yep, don't ask for more than you can handle. We already talked about that. So make sure your documents are ready. So your Irs Determination Letter, like Olivia mentioned, this shouldn't be an issue for General Baptist. You have a group ruling, so contact your pastor. The church should have it on file, but if not, go to kind of your district or conference representative. Current financial statements, I don't think you would need to submit your whole church budget, but having a sense of at least what your annual church budget is a good start. And board of directors, that refers to nonprofits, but if you have either a trustees committee or a team of lay members who represent the organization or the church, excuse me, then that would be a great group of folks to know of and be mindful of. So the overview of your organization, I'd say that's probably the one piece that Partners in Health and Wholeness didn't really have a specific question about, because it's specific to churches, and so a little bit different. I would invite you to think about these questions and be really specific and precise about talking about your organization. And you might want to talk about the ministry of your church, not just your church, right? So when the ministry was started, your mission and who you serve, and the number of people you serve and where, kind of again, the who, what, where, and why, and how you can address that. And you can be really specific in that. This is an example. There's a lot of words, but this is kind of the amount of content that you might be looking at. But I hope you can kind of see, as we've pulled out some of these examples, it's very specific. So an XYZ Baptist church was established in here, and so you can start larger. For over 120 years, the Baptist church has been on the mission to share, serve, and grow in the message of Jesus Christ. So you can talk about your church, and then you can see it kind of narrows down and talk about the two primary outreach ministries, food access and Jobs for Life, a training program ministry that helps with workforce training. And then they also list who they serve, Robeson County, Baptist churches, such as the lives of over 400 unique individuals, or you can also use families served if you're a food pantry that often counts that, through outreach ministries. Describing the issue. So this is the community need. So what is the issue? The best thing that I can give you, advice I can give you, is to be specific. So poor health is too broad, but if you can look up what the obesity rates or the food insecurity rates are in your counties, that would be amazing. So here are some, and we'll send you all of this information, but here, it's really easy to find data to back you up around what you're trying to address. So if you're trying to address food insecurity, there's some good data points from Feeding America. And then also, yeah, if you have data from your own participants around how much you are serving and kind of what they're experiencing, that's even a stronger data point. And so it's really important to think how specific you can get around describing the issue. So if it's food insecurity and lack of access to healthy food, how do you know that people have that, that people don't have access to produce and vegetables? Is it because of how far a grocery store is? Is it because how many people are on food stamps or who are food insecure? You know, I think it's really important when you're kind of developing the issue, when you start to write out a sentence around what the issue is, say, is this specific enough, or in what way is this true? And so provide evidence that the community feels the need, wants the program, and has been involved in planning it. So that's another really important piece, especially if this is for a new program or a new ministry. If you want to start something new, the evidence has got to be there that it's a problem. It can't be like I call it sometimes a straw man, where if you just say food insecurity is a really big problem in our county, I don't know where you got that information from. You kind of have to back it up, especially for funders who are trying to put their dollars in different parts of the state and the different parts of the county. So these are examples of health data and food insecurity. And these are really good examples of how, like, what you could use to incorporate. So you can find what your food insecurity rate is compared to the state average. You can find diet-related disease that's common. And, you know, that says that we surveyed, but you can also find it in some of the data points here around county health rankings. That's a big one. And you can also talk just about your general experience. Like if you receive food from the food bank, we hear over and again, folks that receive food from the food bank, the fresh food comes to them not really so fresh. And so they actually don't feel great about distributing it, and it's just not as quality. So you can use anecdotes like that based on your experience. And then you want to state your goals. So this is like, I think we've had a whole workshop on evaluation around goal setting. So you want to really know what your goal is. The goal is not the project itself. So the goal is not food pantry distribution. It's improving food access. Your goal is not to have a church garden. Your goal is to advance nutrition education, outdoor environmental education. Your goal is to improve access to healthy food for community garden members. You know, you want to think about the program itself, what you're doing. The ministry is not the goal. What is that ministry trying to address? And then that is the goal. And you want it to be doable. So your goal isn't to end food insecurity. Your goal isn't to end hunger. I know that might be an overall goal or hope or prayer for the church and for everyone out there, but it's not realistic or, you know, scalable. You're not going to be able to measure if you've ended food insecurity or not. And so really at the bottom, what you see with the green check marks and the red X, that's the best way to see kind of how you can transition your goals if you're thinking more broadly into something more specific. Like I said, these are really good examples. There's not end hunger for our pantry participants or reduce the rate of diabetes. These are really doable and achievable goals that have really specific things like numbers and what you're going to give them and how and when. crafting the project description, thinking like a funder. So we've provided a lot of information, and it'll all be available to you kind of shorthand and as like resources and copies of slides at the end of this. But I think it is really important to think of if you would fund this once you've written your grant, so you can kind of take a step back and see like, okay, I'm kind of in my head because I'm doing this every day. You know, is it clear? Does the organization have the partnerships behind the project to ensure its success? I think for us, the biggest keys to success that we see, not necessarily the grant writing itself, like we can work with folks around grant writing. It's more, are they working with other partners? Are they working toward an actual identified need in their community? And they're actually succeeding? And are they serving numbers? It's not even about volume, because we primarily work in rural North Carolina. It's that you identified families and folks that have been involved in the programming itself. So those are kind of the keys to success that we see, partnerships, and that they're really meeting a need and meeting it in a really unique or powerful way. I'm being mindful of the time, Olivia, and I don't think we have time to go through all of this. Because I want to save room for questions.
Yeah, we have time, I think, till 1:15, right? Or 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Yeah, so we'll send this out after the fact, obviously, like we mentioned. That activity, that last one, is just an opportunity for you to read it through and say, be honest with yourself and say if that would be explicit enough or detailed enough for you if you were a funder and you had all this money to spend down to fund, as well as an example of something that was a little bit more robust and it pulled all of the pieces that Justine was talking about together. So if you could, Justine, however, go through some of the last slides, inviting them into keeping in touch. So I mentioned before, we have a Facebook page that you can like and follow us on if you're on Facebook. We also have an e-newsletter. It is not like a spammy e-newsletter. We don't even have one that goes out regularly. It's more of just an outreach kind of listserv. So if there's upcoming events, you're the first to know. And there is a more robust version of this grant writing training online, but as a recording. So if you'd like to watch that, there's a link in this PowerPoint, which you will get, as well as one on evaluation, because we did not get to evaluation and we did not get to budgeting today. So we hope that you're able to take some of those virtual trainings, and I hope that they're useful for you. But I'm going to pause because you will be receiving all of this, but are there any questions or follow-up for us about anything that you learned today? Anything at all? If not, you can always reach out to me or Justine after the fact. I'm going to link an evaluation for this training. If you could please, we really, really value your feedback and your opinions about how the training went and how we can serve your churches better. So if you could please go to that link that I just dropped in the chat. Thank you, Justine, for linking our emails as well. So if you have any specific questions, I know this was a lot of information to just dump on you. We're happy to have some one-on-one conversations with you as well. So, and again, I'm going to link the attendance sheet just one more time. So that way, if you do want us to send this to you directly after today's training, we'll at least have your emails, so that way we can do so. So here's the link to that attendance sheet. Oh, and one more thing. Like I mentioned, we would love to have you continue to be part of our network. A lot of you mentioned before that you're trying to do some healthy food pantry-esque stuff. We're going to be having a pretty interactive training coming up on November 10th. called Choose Your Own Local Food Adventure. And y'all are invited to attend. It's basically going to be part literal choose your own adventure. So it'll be interactive, and that will be using some polling to kind of walk through just some considerations for when we're sourcing local food, where to find farmers, working with farmers, distribution concerns, all that good stuff, as well as looking at some peer examples. So you'll get a little taste of that networking that we mentioned earlier. Justine also just put a registration link in the chat. So if you register, you'll be receiving a Zoom link soon. And again, that's November 10th. So it's going to be here in the blink of an eye. So we have 4 minutes left. And again, I want to open the floor for any questions. Okay, hearing none, I just posted the PowerPoint, a download version of the PowerPoint to the chat, so you can download it right from here, if that's easier for you to do than receiving an email after the fact.
And I'll add, these are the resources we'll get to you all. So basically everything I dumped on you the last 20 minutes is going to be here. So there's a whole checklist of kind of what you need. And this is something that you could like look at hand in hand with an application to make sure that you're kind of checking off the boxes in the right ways. And then another piece is Olivia pulled from Grant Station some applications that are coming up that would be optional and encouraging churches to apply. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, I mean, that's a really good place to start. So we kind of give you a cheat sheet there. So would love to make sure that you have those in mind, and please tap us for questions. We're really here to connect with you all on an individual basis. So
yes, and I'm linking all of these things so you have them just in case for some reason we can't get in touch with you, but we'll also be sending all of these resources to Mr. Allen to send out or to post and follow up with everybody as well. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and I hope that this was helpful for some of you.